Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Scott Lieberman. I lead the customer advisory practice here at KPMG, and we work with leading organizations to help them improve marketing, sales, and service through the lens of customer experience enabled by technology platforms. And I've been looking forward to today's discussion for some time. We're excited to share with you today some results from some research into what business leaders cite as important into their buying decisions. I'm joined today by three outstanding leaders, Fernando Iriola from American Express, Stacy Giuliano from Morgan Stanley, and Cynthia Lowe from Capital One. And we will meet our panelists in just a few moments. To the audience, we'll have an opportunity to do Q&A towards the end, a live Q&A session. So if you have questions throughout, please pose them in the chat. Our team will be monitoring that chat throughout the session, and we'll bring those questions to our panelists here. So why don't we take a minute and flash up if we've got results, August, from the poll EV question, or if we need to capture some more content, we can go back to the poll EV page for just a second. Do you have enough results yet?
We do.
All right.
So for the question, for what do you think is the one thing to get right in B2B customer experience excellence? 44% voted integrity, 19% voted personalization, 25% voted problem resolution, and 13% voted empathy.
Great, thanks for that. So 44% with integrity, 19% personalization, 25% problem resolution, and 13% empathy. Remember those statistics, we'll bring them back in our discussion here, and we'll give you a little bit of sense as to some of the data that we've collected. So before we start discussion, let me set the stage. In today's competitive consumer landscape, we know that customer experience has become a critical differentiator. It's talked about day in and day out in our everyday lives. But conventional wisdom suggests that in the business-to-business purchasing decisions, business-to-business landscape, those purchasing decisions are influenced more by price and value delivered. We wanted to find out if the data supported that. So we went deeper. We interviewed key buyers across industries, across three financial services products. First, we spoke with leaders who are purchasing commercial banking solutions, think things like treasury, capital loans, and credit cards. We spoke with leaders across industry representing their firms around commercial insurance and voluntary benefits, including things like commercial liability and supplementary benefits. And we also spoke with key decision makers in multiple industries around their experience in making buying decisions in the retirement and financial wellness solutions, including 401k and financial planning. And our objective was to better understand how client experience influences buying decisions within the business-to-business landscape. And so you see the industries that we represented. They had our interviewees were mostly in the C-suite or just below. And really, it was a great cross-section of leaders from both small to mid-size as well as large enterprises. And what we found is that the stakes are high. Customer experience has an outsized impact on both choosing a service provider and the decision to stay with, or in the case of our data, leave the current provider. As you see, just about 95% of interviewees that we spoke with cited CX as a key factor in their decision to switch providers. And what's notable, between a fifth and just more than a third of firms are dissatisfied or are considering switching providers. So let me bring this discussion into focus and share a little bit more about the context for our customer experience research. On the next page, for over about 10 years plus, KPMG has been doing work in the customer experience space, and the vast majority of that research and work with clients from research perspective has been in the consumer marketplace. And over that period, we've spoken with hundreds of thousands of consumers, and we've asked them about what are the things that drive the experience in the consumer world. And these 6 attributes that you see down the middle of this page, from empathy and personalization all the way to issue resolution and integrity are the drivers of great experience. And in the consumer world, what we found through that body of research is that, and in particular over the past couple of years, is that personalization and empathy, and in particular personalization, have actually driven an outsized result for consumer brands. We see this in our day-to-day lives. We see it with the ability to interact with brands. A lot of the investment historically in improving experience across marketing, sales, and service has benefited the individual consumer businesses. What we found in this recent research that we're featuring today is that for business to business clients, the critical aspect of what makes a relationship work comes down to the firm's ability to successfully resolve issues as they arise. As you see on the right-hand side of this chart, nearly 3/4 of buyers indicated that that was the most important factor in their decision to stay or continue to build relationships. So it is the one big thing that B2B financial services providers need to get right. So turning back to our audience participation question, 44% of you cited integrity, which is an important element. 19% had personalization and 25% issue resolution. So about a quarter of the participants guessed right in terms of that big factor. And I think we'll talk a little bit about, perhaps with our guests, what's the interplay between things like problem and issue resolution and the top selection by our participants around integrity and how you begin to drive that. So let me close this opening comments by just giving you a little bit of a ray of hope. So for those of you who are feeling a bit down, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. For firms that are able to address the critical breakpoints, the breakpoints you see on the left-hand side, our survey found that there's a direct impact on the improvement of loyalty. Firms that are able to address the complexity of the buyer journey through simplification of products and services, along with improving communications and training, all contribute to positive improvements to drive nearly a 40% improvement in customer loyalty. So as we think about that opportunity that exists within the marketplace and across products and services, we're going to open up the discussion now, and I'm going to turn it to our panelists. So Fernando, Stacy, Cynthia, thank you again for joining us today. We're excited to have each of you with us. Before we get into the discussion, let me quickly ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and we'll go in the order here. So Fernando, over to you.
Scott, thank you very much for your kind invitation. Good afternoon, everybody. It is an honor to be part of this conversation together with Stacy and Cynthia. My name is Fernando Iraola. I am the Executive Vice President and General Manager of what we call the Global and U.S. Large Enterprise Business within the Global Commercial Services space at American Express. I've been with the company with a little over 11 months. Prior to that, I worked almost 10 years for Bank of America in different corporate banking and global treasury services leadership roles. And prior to that, I worked 20 years for Citigroup in similar type of roles, corporate banking and global treasury services in different parts of the world. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, Fernando. Welcome. Stacy, over to you.
Thanks so much. Yes, great. So I'm Stacy Giuliano. I lead B2B marketing for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management corporate clients. That means we help educate and engage our client base on the suite of workplace solutions we offer. I've been at Morgan Stanley for 5 years. Before that, I spent over a decade at Verizon and in a variety of other roles. And I'm based in New York, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Stacy. Thank you. And Cynthia, over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, I'm Cynthia Lowe. I'm a Senior Vice President at Capital One, and I lead our Beyond the Card practice, which means that I'm focused on solutions that are outside of credit cards for our business customers. Before Capital One, I've spent 2 decades in financial services. The first half of my career largely focused on pretty traditional roles, investment banking and asset management. And the second half of my career was focused on more operational roles, driving accelerated growth, creating and building a 401k solution for Betterment, leading Schwab's Robo business and their 401k product and high net worth products. And most recently, before Capital One, I was at Goldman's workplace wealth business.
Great. Well, we couldn't have asked for a better panel for this research. I really thank each of you, and your backgrounds are tremendously impactful, and it's great to have this team together. We were talking before the formal start of this that we thought of this event as originally an in-person event, and then went to virtual. But it's ironic now with the four of us find ourselves in different parts of the island of Manhattan today. So we're going to do a virtual event, but we're all probably within a 3/4 of a mile of one another having this discussion. But thank you so much for joining us. Let me open up the discussion. We'll kick it off here. I'll set a little bit more context, and we can just switch to just our panelists. So our research found that the priorities differ between consumer and business customers in financial services, right? We talked about this dichotomy between what consumers value and what business leaders value. And, there is this play between, your individual relationship, right, with your employer. Are you coming at that as a consumer, or, does it shift when you think about it from a business perspective? So I'm gonna start with you, Cynthia, but I'd love to get your perspective on how you've seen customer expectations change over the past few years in financial services, and in particular, what strategies have you found to be effective in helping really better understand and anticipate those changes?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I think I'll touch on two themes for the business customer. I think number one is, as you've mentioned, consumer experiences in financial services are far more advanced than B2B experiences, right? In the consumer realm, I think we've all come to expect seamless experiences, really personalized just for us. And customers are super comfortable, both online as well as mobile. Consumers are really much more adept with digital payments, that Venmo, Zelle, online bill pay. But when you think about businesses, which still send a lot of checks, ACH, in the domestic business payments market, which is $29 trillion, right? As recent as 2022, we still see just under half of businesses make payments using checks and cash as opposed to digital methods, which is obviously very different than what we see in the consumer space. I think it's understandable that these B2B experiences have lagged behind because the needs are far more complex. Business owners typically display a greater reluctance to change and take risks. And beyond that, I think we typically like businesses to focus on the business of doing more business. And so how they process payments is not necessarily super high on that list. I had a boss actually who once said, the last best customer experience that you have is your bar to which everything else is compared. And that totally resonates. Like, these new consumer experiences are resetting our expectations for the B2B space. And as a result, businesses are really beginning to expect more. I think the second theme I'll touch on is this idea that businesses are really desiring more integrated solutions. Like, it's not enough just to be a credit card provider, a bank. I think a poll that I saw recently said typical small businesses leverage 7 different vendors just for back office processes, which often don't integrate, difficult to use together. And I think businesses really want now something that's seamless, integrated, and like the poll mentioned, has a lot of digital capabilities, kind of fits together, is more personalized and really consolidated. So I think those are kind of the two themes. And then lastly, I'll just mention, the strategies that we employ to try to understand the B2B customer better. It's really just getting in front of the customer as much as possible. And I think the second thing is getting things out into the wild. I think of an interview question I had early on in my career, which is like, how do you know whether to sell spaghetti at McDonald's in Italy? And the answer.
Yeah.
How your customer can engage with you.
Awesome. Great. I see Fernando and Stacy nodding their heads. So before we go on to the next topic, any comments on this expectation gap or what we're seeing in the B2B space is different from consumer?
I would just double click on what Cynthia was saying. I think we are seeing a convergence of that personal consumer experience and that adoption of technology in our day-to-day lives as human beings and as individual consumers. And there is an expectation that that real-time experience, that access to information and data, that ability to purchase something and have it delivered to our home in less than 24 hours, that expectation, that convergence of that expectation is moving towards the B2B space, anchored obviously on how technology has really made progress in terms of trying to, I'm going to call it nirvana, get also, corporations of whatever size to that type of access. So we are seeing that happening, and obviously financial, services providers such as ourselves, we continue to put investment dollars to work from a technology advancement perspective to make that experience more seamless, as Cynthia was mentioning. But yes, there's still a gap, and it's a journey.
Yeah, it is definitely a journey. From your perspective, Stacy, any comments around that expectations gap? Or, I mean, I think one of the things that that I was reflecting on is we've gotten so accustomed to the digital experience, or the ability to have it, within an arm's length. Be curious to know what you're seeing from the expectations of your business customers, and how much are they really demanding that shift? And then we'll carry on.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody is demanding it, and Fernando and Cynthia touched on it earlier. It's just the way of the world now. And so for us, I think we see a challenge of balancing the cost of innovation with the benefit of it. How much can we continue to do and service clients and deliver a good client experience, balancing out what it costs to continue to innovate and push forward. And so that's something I think businesses, not only us, but our clients that we talk to on a daily basis, are working through as well now. So that would be, I think, the additional challenge. And how do you communicate and get the insights on what are the things that are really going to matter versus what's nice window dressing, but isn't going to change that client's day-to-day experience with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to come back to the research and kind of broaden the discussion, right? So our research found that it was effective problem resolution is that one thing to get right in business to business. And it's not the only combination, right? But it ends up being an important one based on the data that we've got in this study. And it's the provider's ability to resolve those issues that have a direct impact on loyalty. So I'll come back to you, Fernando. Are you surprised to hear that? And, as a top priority, and along with that, what are some of the challenges you've encountered, that the teams have encountered in helping to close that gap from an issue resolution standpoint?
I'll start by saying that, one, I'm not surprised with the result of the research and having problem resolution up there as part of that customer experience excellence that you were referring to. I would also want to point out that I'm glad to hear that 44% of the audience thinks integrity is key, because without integrity, there's no trust. Without trust, there's no long-standing relationships that can be built. So having said that, again, I think problem resolution is definitely something that differentiates financial services provider from one another, right? We are living in an era where a payment is a payment. Yes, there are multiple type of payment methods, and again, technology is broadening the scope of payment solutions that we can offer to our clients. But when we really differentiate ourselves is through that customer journey. I would place the problem resolution component as one pillar of what we described as the ease of doing business at American Express, a journey that starts with how we prospect potential new clients to the franchise, and how we handhold that experience from day one, particularly throughout the onboarding, which is the first real experience that they have with American Express. And from there on, how do we deliver the value proposition that we told them we can deliver for them? I had an instance a couple of weeks ago with a very global client of ours that, due to a technology glitch, experienced a certain level of service disruption, and the whole organization really react to problem solve with a very intense sense of urgency to ensure that that disruption was taken care of. And once we engaged with the client, walked them through the why, but more importantly, how we solved for the issue and how we made sure that will not repeat itself, again, driven by a technology glitch. The feedback that we got was that, yes, they trust the ability of American Express to problem solve with that sense of urgency, putting their client needs at the very center of what we do. And I think that brought us a significant amount of trust and even further loyalty with that client experience. So problem resolution is absolutely key as part of that ease of doing business journey that I was referring to.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And the idea that you could service recovery your way into building that deep partnership with your customers. So Stacy, you take it from a different angle, from a marketing perspective in your formal role, but feel free to comment around the full journey. Would love to get, were you surprised as well in that finding, and or how are you seeing how you're dealing with the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised. I think in today's world, especially in B2B world, you need to offer something really, truly so different to overcome a poor customer experience. I think building off of some of what Fernando said, it's that foundation of trust that's very important, because when you're trying to improve the customer experience, you're building the plane while you fly it. It's not like you can do it over here and then just roll it out and it goes there. It's an iterative process. It's a trial and error process in some cases. And so that foundation of trust is really important with your clients, because through that journey and trying to get everybody to a better place, there may be some backward steps or side steps that need to happen. But if your clients know and trust that you have their best intentions in mind, and from a marketing standpoint, we want to make sure we're communicating that out, we're having a conversation, we're letting our clients know what we're doing and what we're working towards with them. Then when there are the situations like Fernando talked about, not that anybody anticipates it or is okay with those things happening, they're always a bummer, but that there's some leeway there when those things happen, that there's faith and trust that you're in this together and you're going to get through it, because they know the journey that you're collectively on to make their experience better. And so I think that's really key.
Yeah, it's tremendous. So Cynthia, you've had an interesting journey, right? You've been across a number of these different market segments in your own career, and would just love your reaction, to the study around this issue resolution and what you're seeing either now or what you've seen more broadly, right, in terms of your perspective.
Yeah, I love the comments from Stacy and Fernando. You're hearing like a lot of words about foundation of trust, integrity, and using issue resolution to build trust. Like, I think we're all aligned that that's such an important foundation on servicing customers. I guess I'll take a different tact on like, why is this so challenging? And I think, B2B experiences are really hard for a few different reasons. The actual end customer, first of all, is very multifaceted. You've got the CEO founder, but also the account manager, the finance lead, all of these various roles that have different permissions, different needs, different priorities that are logging in and ostensibly using the same customer interface. I think the second piece of it is every industry is different. We have construction clients that have a lot of capital on their balance sheet. We've got digital consumer businesses that are turning their inventory on a daily basis. And so all of these use our products and services in very, very different ways. And the last thing I'll mention is just business data. Consumer data is so straightforward relative to business data, where there's multiple entities, chains, branches, things that close, LLPs, different, like all types of different companies. And so when we think about pulling this all together and now getting to like problem resolution with all of these nuances piled on top, you can see how it gets really complicated really quickly. And so the trick is, how do you manage through these complications and serve each customer in the manner that they feel like meeting them where they are?
Yeah, that's a great segue. We'll kind of dive into some of that here in our next segment. I think your perspective on that complexity is important, and the variety of differentiating. We talk about the segmentation schemes within the consumer world, but you overlay some of the things that you just described into the B2B world, and it gets multidimensional really fast. And you've got client account teams, servicing professionals who are all focused on providing that one experience that has to be tailored. And a lot of what I see in organizations today is it's done through the power of great people, and it's done through the power of outstanding delivery around those capabilities, and that we have an opportunity as a marketplace to begin to upskill and up that capability so that the technology and the automation and the solutions that are available to that great human capital team is just as powerful as in the consumer side, and there's a lot of complexity to deal with. Just to insert another bit of the research, right? So we showed that nearly 95%, a staggering amount of clients consider a poor experience an important factor in their decision to switch, and there was 27% who were either dissatisfied or considering making a switch. And I'll come back to you, Stacy. Talk a little bit about what strategies have you seen to be effective in attracting and retaining, those customers, because the experience itself is that we've proven or we've shown is a key differentiator. But interested in what you're seeing broadly firms put in place to really drive that attraction and retention.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the big things that just drives so much of this is to listen, which seems so easy and basic, but sometimes can be really hard. And it's listening combined with having a regular engine in place to be able to listen. And then I think most importantly, not to be afraid of what you hear. I've worked in places where there's been conversations of like, well, let's not talk to those clients because they're unhappy. And it's like, no, those are the clients we should be talking to the most, not only for them individually in terms of how do we improve that experience and their relationship, but also what can we learn from them of other clients who maybe aren't saying concerns they have, and how do we use what we see over here to model who we should be also worried about and getting ahead of, given they're showing similar characteristics or similar conversations. And so I think really being able to have those sometimes uncomfortable conversations, being able to look yourself in the mirror and take a really self-reflective view, not as individuals, but as an organization, and have those uncomfortable conversations to confront head on what's working and what's not working, to try and address it with our clients, address it in what you deliver. I think that's just incredibly critical and can be very difficult to do, but when done right and done as part of the culture of what you do and how you service clients, really can be incredibly valuable, because there's the squeaky wheels that you always hear from and you need to know you need to fix. But candidly, I think the scarier risk is the clients who just don't say anything and kind of like slip out the back door in the night. And you're like, wait, I didn't see that coming. You didn't tell me there was a problem. But if you can learn to start modeling some of these things and start to see, even when clients aren't saying anything, where there might be issues, I think that's really critical to being able to get ahead of some of this churn, and certainly helps make attracting new clients go smoother as well.
Interesting. Appreciate those comments. So, just watching the chat, the statistic that I was talking about earlier that kicked us off was that our research shows that 95% of clients consider a poor customer experience an important factor in their decision to switch. So, the degree to which experience is an important factor in their willingness to, or their desire to switch. But Fernando, you've lived this in multiple places, and we're talking about some difficult topics, but interested in what your reaction to Stacy's comments and what you've seen effective in attracting and retaining customers.
I'll start by sharing two anecdotes. One, in the month of June, we brought our global organization together for an internal meeting, and we kicked off that conversation with a client panel. So we had 4 of our most global and large clients in a panel, and the common theme throughout that conversation was the relevance and the importance, and connecting this with what Stacy was saying, is knowing your client needs and really understanding what their business objectives are, what their pain points are, and trying to get ahead and solving for those, but also in that dynamic of having that fluent dialogue, conversation, the listening, is how do we make sure that that understanding of client needs is informing our capabilities roadmap, our servicing roadmap, and how do we think about ensuring that we are staying ahead of solving for those issues. So everything is anchored on that understanding your client business, your client needs, their business objectives, and solving for those. That goes a long way to create that trust that builds that long-standing relationship. And then again, to what you were saying, Scott, how do we apply technology to those capabilities, technology to those servicing? So you combine the best of both worlds with great human capital and great technology to ensure that you are meeting and hopefully exceeding those client needs as part of that client experience. One of the things I would say again is customer experience journey, and that excellence, I think, has been part of the DNA of American Express. And I go back to, in an era where, yes, you must have product capabilities. Yes, you must be competitive from a pricing perspective. How do you differentiate yourself?
Yeah.
Is really that servicing and client experience that you can provide, anchored on truly understanding your client needs and your client's business.
Yeah. So a lot of this research was prompted by a question that I got from a client about a year ago about, this idea, like, help us get underneath the buyer behavior, right? And I think each of your respective brands does that for your own benefit, but it's a difficult market to get a sense of how are people feeling across the board, because those buying decisions, the purchase decisions are so unique. But what you are all saying is consistent, right? It is you got to have that listening post. You got to have the ability to do the issue resolution with a specific set of actions. You have to be. It's all built on the foundation of integrity, But then being able to bring that to life in individual experiences that really matter for those B2B clients, I think is what we are hearing a lot about when we talk to clients. So. We got a couple of minutes, Cynthia, just your perspective on this gap, and strategies that you're seeing firms use to drive attraction and retention in the face of preventing clients from looking elsewhere. I mean, it's easy to look, it's hard to actually switch, I would argue, but just curious what you're seeing.
Yeah, maybe I'll hit on two things from the prior discussion. I think, we've spent a lot of time talking about like servicing and sort of swarming on resolution and that type of thing. But I think increasingly we're looking to solve these things digitally, right? It should feel like we're wrapping our arms around you and giving you a big hug digitally. So you don't have to call us. You can chat. It's an automated response, and we completely address the need. It's not the frustrating back and forth experience. You're not saying agent on the phone 8 times before you get to a human. It's all really, really seamless and scalable. And so when we think about servicing, it's not just yes with the relationship manager, yes with the call center, but the digital experience feels like it's service personalized and catered towards you. And I think that will be more and more important as you see broader adoption of things like AI across the board.
Yeah.
The second thing I'll mention is I'm at Finovate right now in New York. So I'm meeting with a lot of great and interesting fintech companies. And a meeting I had earlier this morning talked about how 50 to 60% of their roadmap is actually driven by client feedback. What an amazing stat to be able to share and say, gosh, our roadmap is not only about how we envision the future, but we're actually incorporating all of that feedback every time you leave it for us. And our roadmap is composed more than half of addressing the needs that we hear from our customers. And I thought that was just a really, really cool metric and way of thinking about like how productive and how much progress they're making on their product roadmap.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we're gonna. I've got one more sort of formal question, but as a reminder, if folks would like to ask a question, please post in the chat. We're monitoring the chat for questions. We also collected some questions from individuals who couldn't join us today live that we'll pepper in during the live Q&A for our panelists. But we can't have a panel in 2024 without asking about generative AI, and I'll ask it in such a way we'll get each of you to give your perspective on it. But what's your view on what impact generative AI will or will not have on serving your customers in the segment that you serve? So I'll come back to you, Stacy, and ask you about this question that seems to be out there in the wild on every discussion.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I'm all in. I've like drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm ready to go on it. So you know what you're going to get in my answer. I do think this is a fundamental shift in how we operate, both as a business and candidly as a society. How it's all going to play out, TBD, but I think the promise you can see in the kind of efficiency, like even if you just think from an efficiency standpoint, from even as a marketer or just more broadly, the things that generative AI can do that take humans a good amount of time that this machine can do so quickly just really gives the ability to let humans do more things and more different things. We all have the list of things we want to do every day or the week or the year. And like, there's that bottom portion that you just can't get to because there's not enough hours in the day. And I truly think that enabling AI in smart ways will allow us to get to more of that list. It's not to say you need fewer people to do it, but it's the people who are embracing and going to be using AI in new and innovative ways. That's the thing to keep an eye on. I know a lot of people are worried it's going to take their job and other things, but it really is more about, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's a person who uses AI better than you that's going to take your job. And I think really getting familiar with it and finding new and thoughtful applications of it, which is challenging in the financial industry, because it's not like we can all just go out and do whatever we want, but really methodically and thinking about how it can allow employees to do more in the world of clients and beyond is really very exciting to me.
Yeah, so that idea of what I hear you saying, right, is around the enablement of the employee experience on behalf of the delivery of an improved client experience and making that employee more productive, capable, insightful. Cynthia, any thoughts around, yay or nay? And then how do you agree with Stacy in terms of employee, and will it bleed over into the end client?
I think, like Stacy, I'd probably drink the Kool-Aid as well. I think we're in a pretty incredible era of Gen AI. I think the thing that we think about a lot is, AI is not just something you turn on and voila, like all of a sudden you have this magical, wonderful solution. You really have to invest in three things we think are pretty foundational. I think the first is just having a modern tech stack, right? Doing things like going all in on the cloud, staying front and center in cloud innovation. The second is high quality data. So many of us wrestle with data, and the output of AI is only going to be as good as what you've inputted. And so how do you organize and update data in a way that will be super effective when we do implement AI? And the last one is top talent. How can we attract the type of talent that's really going to push the edges of innovation? But I definitely think you're going to start to see the impacts not only on back-end customer service, but when we're ready to adapt it on the front end as well, making everything just leaps and bounds forward than we are today.
Yeah, fair. Fernando, thoughts?
I am in violent agreement with both Stacy and Cynthia. I cannot wait to put my hands on the latest Apple release to start experiencing more of that myself. But I agree. I think, again, it's all going to be about productivity, efficiency, but also, again, back to the point that you're making, Scott, at the beginning of this conversation, that personalization, that application of that technology towards the customer journeys, whether it is an individual or a corporation, I think are going to get even further facilitated by the application of this artificial intelligence going forward. I also agree with Cynthia. It's about that tech modernization. If you don't have a modern tech stack, applying artificial intelligence would probably be complex and may not be the right solution. So it starts there. And also to what Stacy was saying, this is not about losing our jobs as a consequence of that, is how do we adapt ourselves and learn and take advantage of what the many things that we'll be able to do by applying that technology responsibly, which is also part of the journey. So at American Express, we've been using machine learning and some sort of artificial intelligence since 2010, particularly connected to risk management activities, fraud, and you can expect a lot more of that going forward. But again, applying artificial intelligence to making our colleagues a lot smarter, insightful, efficient, and productive as a consequence of that. So all in, and I can't wait for that journey.
Yeah, and you hit on it, Fernando, the trust factor, right? The trusted AI and the ability to both have the data, the insights, the intelligence, and the modeling capability to put that insight into an experience for your employees or your constituents and your clients in a way that's trusted through and through, right? That doesn't create any conflict for the brand. It doesn't create any conflicts, but it enables that experience in a way that ups your integrity and the ability to deliver that better, faster, with more value. So great discussion. I couldn't get a naysayer. We'll try again, see at some point to see if in the future if anybody is gonna be down on it. But I think we're at the beginning of a remarkable change opportunity for the world, really. But really excited to see what happens here within this market, because I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve on behalf of clients. So we're going to open it up to one or two of the live questions that were addressed in the chat, and then get into some of the Q&A that we pulled in from folks who couldn't join us live today. So I'm going to invite my colleague Remy to just prompt us with a question or two here. So I'll ask you to join us, Remy.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Great speaking today. Our first question from the audience is there a difference between large, medium, small business expectations?
Yeah, I know we've got a variety of different perspectives here in terms of how each of you are representing both current roles and prior roles. So Fernando, I'll maybe come back to you first. Right? You talk a little bit about expectations across the market.
I think there is a difference given, again, the size, the scope, and the complexity of different B2B clients. The small business type of client, there is, again, that convergence, which Cynthia was referring to. That's a business owner that is operating a small business venture. So again, the convergence of that consumer experience and that business experience is a lot closer than as you continue to grow in size, scope, and globality of corporations. The complexity increases. You have corporate policies that also come to play, they play a significant role in terms of how we financial services providers are making sure that they are meeting those policies. The other observation I would make, again, small business, you have an owner that is probably using multiple hats when it comes to interfacing with that financial services provider. So he or she is the owner of multiple wallets. When you move up the scale in terms of size, scope, and complexity, then you're dealing with multiple stakeholders, different wallet owners, different problems to be solved as part of that bigger venture. So yes, there are definitely differences, and each client segment requires a different approach to those client and customer experience journeys that we have been discussing about.
Yeah. Stacey, you're in a different market. What's your perspective around this? Does the segment, what role does the segment really play?
I mean, I think it does play a role. I also think the sector that the client sits in plays a big role in terms of the expectations. Cynthia, you talked earlier about the expectations of maybe a construction sector versus tech sector in terms of what that overall experience is likely very different. I think from what I've seen, larger clients expect more because they can pay more, like they can pay for the better thing. Whereas small clients, in some cases, as Fernando mentioned, as they're just starting out or getting going, their expectations may be different because of how they've grown, but also in terms of their focus on having the best solution for them. In some cases, like close enough is good enough, and as they scale, it becomes more and more important. And so I think we see a lot of that as well, but certainly a big difference in terms of what the expectations are across the history of that company and where it sits industry-wise.
Yeah. Why don't we'll try to get a couple more questions in here. So Remy, I'm going to prompt you for another one.
Yes. Next question. What other sectors or brands do you draw inspiration from for creating great B2B experiences outside of financial services? What are some of these examples?
Yeah. Trying to read Cynthia's face, whether or not she wants to jump in, but I'll see you. Either within or outside of financial services, is there a beacon of light that's helpful in this, or is it more we got to grind through the things that we're trying to deliver, and it's so specific to the products and solutions that really makes the difference? We'd love your reflections on that.
I didn't hear the name you said. Was it
Cynthia? You.
Okay, I'm happy to jump in. I missed that. Sorry. I thought about this one. I think a lot of like what you've heard before, kind of going back to the top of the call when 44% said integrity, it's really about the brand and the trust and the foundation. And I think being in the financial services industry, frankly, we're in the fortunate position that most other industries are ahead of us. And so when I think about brand stories, I'll share one, with the Olympics recently and all of that. One of the brand stories I found most inspiring was Seiche. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is the brand that was founded by Allyson Felix, who's an extremely, well-decorated track and field athlete, 11 Olympic, 20 World Championship medals. And she was sponsored by Nike. And as the story goes, when they became aware she was pregnant, they cut her pay by 70% and really told her, gosh, you should know your place, which of course ignited an outcry from Allyson, but really all women. And she created a brand that was designed by women and for women. And so I think about this story and I love it for so many reasons, but more than anything, it's mission driven. It's targeting an underserved demographic, meeting an unmet need. And it stands for so much beyond shoes. It's empowerment, it's solidarity, it's strength. And I think when you think about, gosh, customer experience really meets the minimum bar with positive service resolution. But when it goes above and beyond is when the customers feel affiliated with a brand that stands for something that they're strongly aligned to. Yeah. And so I think about like, how do you transcend just like, I'm going to like fix your problem, but like not only that, I'm going to stand for the things that you stand for. And I just love that concept.
It's it's really interesting you make that point. Our research that we published actually in last year's study on the consumer side was all about breakaway brands. And since we've done this work for over 10 years, the brands that were consistently in that top 10 were more often than not founder-driven, purpose-driven, community connected in some way to a community, even broadly speaking, right? And even in the modern articulation of that. Now, there's some more commercialized brands, of course, but I think that connection, the human connection, is really what forms that foundation. So thank you for bringing that part of the discussion. Fernando looks like he wants to engage in this topic, but I'd love to get your perspective.
I was kind of, take us in a slightly different direction. There are two examples of companies, huge, massive corporations out there that I think they drive two very distinctive things. One is going back to the Apple and that passion for product design, and that product design being so cool, and the beginning of that journey so aspirational, but now having become so entrenched with day-to-day life that walking away from a smartphone has become increasingly difficult, if not impossible. So that obsession with product design, I think it's something that I really would highlight from Apple. And then the customer obsession that Amazon has, and again back to connecting e-commerce, access, technology, and that ability to deliver that promise, but to be truly obsessed on making sure that that customer is happy with the outcome of that engagement. I think that customer obsession also is something that resonates with me.
Amazing. I'm going to ask Remy for one last question here, and see where we go.
Great. Last question. Would love to hear any perspectives on how attribution or what models might be most effective with the changing landscape, and specifically what is resonating with sales and leadership.
Yeah. So this question of, how do you get at the underlying drivers or root cause, and then the attribution of that back into your sales cycle. So maybe a little bit more of a technical question, but I'd love to get, I don't know, Stacy, your perspective or on any thoughts on how to really get at that question around the attribution of results.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge to have the tech enabled, and it goes back to what Cynthia said earlier, to have that tech stack and that clean data and infrastructure to be able to really articulately figure out from a multi-attribution model standpoint what's contributing to the sales cycle. I think it's in some ways easier said than done. Obviously, some brands do it incredibly well. But I think the focus on understanding, even if it's not technologically enabled, but understanding the aspects and elements that play into a customer journey and that conversion journey from a sales standpoint is critically important and different by business, even within the walls of Morgan Stanley, how we look at this across wealth management versus the investment bank, corporate clients versus individual wealth management clients. It's all very different based on the nature of those sales cycles.
Great. Thank you for that. So I'm going to bring this to a close. Thank you, Fernando, Stacy, Cynthia, for participating in a wide-ranging discussion here about this research. I know it's a topic of interest for each of you, and want to thank you and your organizations for giving us the benefit of your time in both the preparation for today as well as the time spent. And we're really excited about where we're taking this over the next year or so. We're going to be focusing in explicitly in the business-to-business space, and we think there's a lot of discussion to be had both within financial services and across industries about the challenges that companies are facing in building better brands through experience improvement by affecting change across marketing, sales, and service. So feel free to reach out. We will, for those of you who are registered and attended, we'll be publishing the results of the study in the coming months, and then also the results of this webinar. So with that, I'll thank our panelists once again, and I'll close the call there. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.